Hilchos Shabbos Perek Esrim. Laws of Shabbos, chapter 20. 20 out of 30. Today is the last chapter dealing with carrying. It's also somewhat of its own topic as well, because it deals with the mitzvah of having our animals rest on Shabbos. Besides for us resting on Shabbos, if you look right up here at the screen, this is a verse from the portion of Kisisa. It says, Sheshet yamim ta'aseh ma'asecha, 6 days you do your work, Vayom hashvi'i tishbot, the 7th day you rest, Leman yanuach shorcha v'chamorecha, so that your ox and your donkey will rest. There's a special mitzvah for the animals to rest. So the main topic is going to be carrying, because many times the way to violate an animal's rest is through carrying. But technically, we're going to see in a moment, your animal also cannot do anything for which you'd be liable on Shabbos, on the death penalty. Any of the other 39 works are also not allowed. But the main topic is the carrying. That's why I think this chapter is over here, because it concludes the topic of carrying. Says the Rambam, Halacha Aleph Asur lehotzi masal habehema b'Shabbat. It's forbidden to have a load be carried out on an animal on Shabbos. Shene'emar, as it says, that's the verse we just saw, Leman yanuach shorcha v'chamorcha. So your ox and donkey should rest. The truth is, the Torah talks about oxes and donkeys, but echad shor v'chamor, ve'echad kol behema chayav. The law applies both to an ox and a donkey, and to any undomesticated animal or domesticated animal or a bird. V'im hotzi al habehema. But if you did violate this prohibition, and you did carry a load on an animal on Shabbos, afal pishu mitzuve al shvitata, even though you are commanded to have it rest, eino lokel, we cannot hold you liable to the point that we give you lashes. We don't punish you. Lefisha isuro ba miklal aseh. I think it's one of the first times we're having this topic. It's a very interesting concept in halacha. Whenever you derive a prohibition from a positive statement in the Torah, we cannot give you lashes. It doesn't say anywhere over here, you see, it doesn't say your animals should not do work. It says your animals should rest. So if you violate the rest, we can't give you lashes. It's called in the Talmud, lav haba miklal aseh. A negative prohibition, which is learned, which is derived from a positive statement. Lefichach, therefore, says the Rambam, hamechamer, achar behem tol b'Shabbat, one who directs or leads his animal on Shabbos, v'haya aleha masoy, and it had a load, patur, you're totally exempt. Rabbinically, it's forbidden, but biblically, you're exempt because you haven't actually done anything active with your animal. Let's say the animal just already had a load from before Shabbos. You're directing it. It's going with a load by your power. That's called mechamer, and it's forbidden rabbinically, but not biblically. Halacha Beh, it says the Rambam, I tricked you. This verse that I showed you is only one of the verses which talks about animals on Shabbos. There's another clear commandment in the Torah where it does say, in a negative sense, that your animal should not do work. That's in the 10 Commandments on the screen right over there. Shene'emar, as it says, Lo ta'aseh kol malacha, ata, uvincha, uvitecha, v'avdecha, v'amotcha, and the last word there is, uvehemtecha. You cannot do any work, you, your son, your daughter, your slave, your maidservant, and your animals. So it says clearly that you're not allowed to have your animal violate the Shabbos. So what do you mean? It's only couched in a positive sense and you don't get lashes. The verse says clearly negative. It says the Rambam, that verse is talking about everything else besides for carrying. It's not doing any of the other 39 categories of work. Not plowing with your animal or anything like it. And in that case, is another topic that we're going to come up with later in the Rambam many times. It turns out that this is a lav shenitan la'azharat mitat beit din. It's a prohibition that could potentially carry with it the death penalty. Anytime there's a potential to get the death penalty for a prohibition, you never get any other punishment for it. Ve'ein lokin alav. You cannot get lashes. Even if the way that you did it doesn't hold you liable for the death penalty, since it's a lav that's associated with the death penalty, we never give you any other punishment like lashes. Therefore, if you violated Shabbos in any other way besides for carrying with your animal, we also can't hold you accountable. So whatever verse you take a look at, animals are not going to hold you accountable.
Does that
now,
include your animal soul?
Huh? Your animal soul? Mystically, probably. Give your animal soul less treatment on the Shabbos.
Let it rest.
Yeah.
Let it rest.
Now, as an aside, the Rambam gets into a whole conversation here about selling animals to goyim. Because since a Jewish animal cannot be doing work on Shabbos, that also governs how Jews can have their animals interact with non-Jews. It says the Rambam, Asur li Yisrael lahash'il o lahaskir behema gasa lenochri. There are two types of animals in halacha. Fat animals and thin animals. Basically like oxen in that category and then sheep in that category. So a Jew cannot lend or rent out his thick animal, his oxen. I think they're called ovines, right? Versus the bovines. Or the opposite, bovine or ovine, I don't remember exactly. But one of them is, huh? But one of them is like bigger, and one of them is smaller. Anyway, the big animals, you can't lend or rent. Why? Shelo ya'aseh b'melacha b'Shabbat. Because if you're going to have the guy renting your animal or borrowing your animal, he's going to do work with it on Shabbos. V'harehu mitzuveh al shvitat behemto. And the Jew is commanded that his animal should rest, and it's not going to be resting. Asru chachamim limkor behema gasa lenochri. Look how far the sages took it. They forbade a Jew from selling one of these bigger animals to a non-Jew. Shema yash'ilo yaskir. Perhaps he might come to lend or rent the animal. And if he did sell, konsinoto ad asara bedameha umachzira. We fine the Jew to repurchase the animal up to 10 times the amount. You must buy it back. Afilu shvura in mochrin. And the truth is, even if it's a broken animal, it can't do any work, it's limping, it's crippled, you don't sell it. Umutar limkor lehem al yedei sarsur. What you could do is you could sell it through a broker. Sha'sarsur eino maskir ve'eino mashil. Because the broker won't come to lend or rent your own animals. So if he sells it for you, that's fine. You know, there's a story in the Talmud about the Jew who sold his animal to a guy with Shabbos. Sold an animal to the guy. And what's the story there? I forgot already. Oh, and it wouldn't do work. It wouldn't work on Shabbos. This animal wouldn't work. It was a stubborn animal. Because he used to belong to a Jew. Exactly. So the Jew came over to the animal and whispered something in his ear. What did he whisper? He said, cow, now you used to belong to a Jew. You couldn't work on Shabbos. Now you belong to a guy. You have to work on Shabbos. And the guy was so inspired by that story that he himself converted. He was called Rabbi Yochanan ben Torta. Rabbi Yochanan, the son of the ox. Because he was converted by an ox. So the commentaries say, how did that happen? If you can't sell an animal to a guy, how did it happen? It happened through a broker. Halakha dalet. Umutar limkor lahem sus. A horse you could sell to the animal, to the goyim. She'ein hasus omer lirchivat adam lo lemasoi. Because horses are only meant to be ridden by people. They're not used for carrying loads. And we have the principle that a live person carries his own weight. So even if a non-Jew is going to ride your horse on Shabbos, it's no problem because he carries his own weight.
But Sim used to carry chariots and a lot of loads.
Yeah, but that was not on them. That was like they used to pull it. Yeah. Oh, I have my picture of here. This is the cow and the goat market. Here you go. They're selling animals. The same way you cannot sell an animal to a goy. You can't even sell it to a Jew who's suspect of selling animals to goyim. You can also sell them a cow if it's directly for slaughtering. You watch the guy slaughter it right in front of you. So there's no suspicion of coming to use it for work. You should never sell without stipulation. Even if you're selling it an ox made by a fattener. In other words, you know he's selling it for the purposes of slaughtering. Doesn't matter. You cannot let the sale go by without saying it specifically. Because maybe he's going to keep it for a little bit, do some work, get some more bang for his buck, and then he'll slaughter the animal. But that's all about thick animals, big animals, oxen, that kind of a thing. But if it's a place where people sell thinner animals to the goyim, like sheep, then you can sell. If the custom is not to sell, we don't sell. But again, thicker animals, bigger animals, you don't sell, even undomesticated ones like moose, that kind of a thing. You don't sell anything. Only through a broker. Okay, so now we're returning to, that was as far as animals doing work. Now we're returning to the laws of animals carrying. It says that a person is on the road Friday afternoon and it gets dark. And there was no guy with him to give him his wallet. If there was a guy, ideally you give it to him. He carries it for you. But you don't have a guy with you. But you do have an animal with you. Like the guy's doing over here. You place your pouch on the animal as it's walking. The moment you see the animal wants to stop, you take off the pouch. So it should never stop while the pouch is on it. So there isn't a full carrying. Biblically, in order to be liable for carrying, you have to have a lift off from a steady place and a placing on a steady place. If you put the wallet on the animal while it's walking, you never placed it on a steady place, only if it stops. Just before it stops, you pick it up. And so you haven't picked it up from a steady place either. But in this case, you cannot lead your animal, afilu b'kol, even by your voice, so long as the pouch is on it. So you're not going to be leading on the Shabbos, which is forbidden. But the sages decreed, the only time you can put your pouch on the animals if there's no guy with you If there's a guy, you have to give it to the guy. Halacha zayin, hayai mocheres shoteh v'katan. What if you have an animal, but you also have Jews who are exempt from mitzvahs? A deaf mute, a mentally unstable person, a child. Maniach kiso ala chamor. Rather put your pouch on the donkey or on the animal that's with you. Ve'eino notno le'achad mehen. Don't give it to one of the Jews. Mipnei she'en adam Yisrael. Bottom line, they're a Jew. Why should you have a Jew violate the Shabbos if you don't have to? But if you only have a deaf mute and a mentally unstable person, and there's no animal, of the two, which should you give it to? Notno lashoteh. You give it to the mentally unstable because he is on a higher level of incapacitation as it regards to mitzvahs. Deaf mutes sometimes could be involved in mitzvahs. Like when it comes to divorce. If a guy's a deaf mute and he needs to divorce his wife, there's a way you can ask him, and if he nods 3 times and shakes his head 3 times, different ways. But a mentally unstable person is typically, for the most part, totally exempt from mitzvah. So you give it to him. Shoteh v'katan, if you have a mentally unstable person and a child, also, notno lashoteh. Give it to the mentally unstable, because the child will become bar mitzvah eventually. He will become fully liable for all mitzvahs. Better help educate him now. Cheresh v'katan, if you have a deaf mute and a child, now they're equal. Give it to whichever one you want. You have nothing with you. No animals, no people, no goyim. You're carrying your wallet. The Talmud says we know a Jew's not going to leave his wallet behind. Jews are very careful with their money. So the sages wanted to give you some kind of permission to carry your wallet home. You can walk with it by taking intervals of less than 4 amot steps. Less than 6 feet at a time. Even if it wasn't your own wallet, even if it was a wallet you found on the road. So technically you could think, just leave it alone. Like you found it, same way you didn't have it till now, you won't have it tomorrow. The sages allowed you. You're allowed to walk with it by less than 4 amot intervals. But if you haven't picked it up yet, this lost object, before it came to your hand, it's already Shabbos. If you can wait there till after Shabbos, you can wait till it gets dark and carry it back home. If not, the sages allowed you to take it less than 4 amot at a time, because they knew that if we don't let you do that, you're just going to carry it straight up, because it's money, and a Jew needs money. One is allowed to pull an animal by its specific rein or bridle into the public domain. But it has to be the animal that's designated for this type of bridle or muzzle. And he gives some examples. Kigon, sher lesus, the special chain for a horse. On the left side there, you see the chain for the horse. Ve'afsar legamal. I don't know the proper English words for these, but the bottom line is this little muzzle on the top right for the camel. Special way you tie it, that's the one that's meant for the camel. Ve'chatam lenaka. The chatam for a naka. Some say naka is a llama, some say it's a female camel. It also has a special chain that you would tie to its nose, if you see on the picture over there.
Naka is a female.
Naka in today's Hebrew is a female. Okay. V'sugar lekelev. Also a type of chain. A leash, but it's more like a chain that would go around the neck, which will then be attached to a leash for a dog. But if you were to take an animal out with a little rein or rope, which isn't big enough or strong enough to guard it, let's say you tied a regular rope to a horse's mouth, it's not going to work. Or a rein that it doesn't need. It could be guarded with less than it. You're going bigger than necessary. You're taking out a donkey with a horse's rein. A donkey can do with less. Or chatul besugar. Or you take out a cat with a dog's chain. You don't need it. So it's called a load. Less or more is problematic. Additional guarding or less guarding is considered to be a load. Halakha Ted says the Rambam. Lo yikshor gmalim zeba zeva yimshach. Where's my other picture? Oh, top of the picture here. You cannot tie a bunch of camels to each other and then pull all the camels together. Even if they were tied together before Shabbos, you can't pull this herd on Shabbos. What you can do is, you can take a bunch of individual ropes, in the bottom of the picture, you see that over there. Take a bunch of individual ropes and put it into your hand. And then you can take each animal, because you're allowed to take each animal on its own rein. But all the ropes have to stay in your hand. They cannot leave your hand a hand breadth out of your hand. וצריך שיהיה החבל שמפי הבהמה עד ידו, גבוה מן הארץ טפח או יותר. And the entire rope must remain also, at all times, a handbreadth above the ground. So you have like these long ropes sometimes, you can't let it drape too much to the point that it's within a tefach of the ground. Because then it's like it's attached, and then it's like there's more carrying problems. Now, what's the problem? What's the problem with taking a herd of camels one after another? Same thing, the reins are proper, you should be allowed. It says the Rambam for a different reason. It looks like you're taking them to the market. Who piles up 4 camels in a line and takes them for a ride on Shabbos? Only a camel seller. So a Jew watching you will think you're going to the market. Or maybe you're going to a camel game, maybe a camel competition, taking your camels.
Yeah, the Arabs
Huh?
The Arabs are really into that.
Exactly. For the same reason, the sages said, an animal should not go out with a bell on its neck. Even if it was plugged. Plugged means either you pulled out the clapper, so it can't make any noise, or you stuffed it with material. Bottom line is it can't make any noise. So there's no problem of muktzah or instruments on Shabbos. But a Jew walking by will see a cow with a bell, he's thinking, no, he's going to the market. An animal should not go out with a bell attached to its coverings even, not even hanging from its neck, even attached to its clothing or whatever you put over an animal. Nor with a seal attached to its neck. Nor with a seal attached to its clothing. Neither with a rope attached to its feet. You can't see that here. Nor with the ladder that was attached to its neck. They used to sometimes attach a ladder to a donkey's neck. So it means of transportation. You don't go with this ladder. A donkey can also not go out on Shabbos wearing its saddle cloth. It's this, right? Before you put up the saddle, you have a little cloth going over the donkey. Unless it was tied before Shabbos, then it's allowed. A camel should not go out on Shabbos with a say over here, a patch attached to its hump or its tail. You see over here? On the top, you have the patch on the tail, and you have the patch, no. Karbashto is the hump, little patch on the hump. I don't know if you can see it over there. Anyway, you don't go out with a patch on the hump, unless it was actually tied down to the tail and the hump together. You should also not take animals with their foreleg tied up. You see over there? Don't know why they would do that, but that's a way you could do a camel. And with its 2 legs tied together either. And the same applies to all the animals. These are considered to be loads for the animal, and it cannot go out with them. Let's talk about some other animals. Top right, chickens. Chickens cannot go out with the strings or with the straps attached to their feet. See over there? You would tie them either around one leg, then it was like a sign of ownership, or around 2 legs, so they couldn't really go very far. Sheep cannot go out with the little mini wagons or trolleys that were attached under their tail. See it over there? Bottom right. The ewes, female sheep, cannot go out with pieces of wood that they used to put up their nostrils, so they should sneeze excessively, and the worms in their brain would come out. Apparently there were some worms that would make their ways into their brain, and by sneezing strongly, it would come out. So they would put, in the Talmud that's called chanunot, they would put his little wood chip up the nostril, and it would sneeze. On Shabbos, it's a load. A calf cannot go out with a small yoke. It's like a training yoke. See on the left over there? All the way on the left. It's called a gimon in the Talmud. You would kind of get it used to carrying yokes and get used to plowing. You can't put that on Shabbos. And you can't have an animal go out with a little hairnet that they used to put over their mouths or over their mouths so it shouldn't bite or it shouldn't eat. Protective muzzle, you can't go out on Shabbos. A cow cannot go out with a porcupine hide that they used to cover over its udders, so rodents shouldn't nurse from it while it's sleeping. so pointy, pokey coverings, so they would hurt the rodents, and you wouldn't get near it. It also should not go out with a little strap attached between its horns, as you see in the picture there too. Whether that strap is there for beauty or for guarding it, like to its ownership. If you pierced a goat's horns, then if you tied a leash through the horns, tried using AI to make a picture of this. I don't know if it worked out so well. Little piercing in the top of the horn, and a rope kind of going through it. If it's tied through the piercing, you can go out with it on Shabbos.
But they used to work with them?
Huh?
Take them to work?
Either work or would just to graze. Point is, you're taking it outside of the public domain on Shabbos. You can't do it if it has this type of leash. But if you stuck the rope through the beard of the goat, asur, that's forbidden. Shema tenatchenu, because maybe it's gonna tear off, it's gonna cut off. V'yenu biado b'shut harabim, and you're gonna carry the rope by hand in the public domain, which is not allowed. V'chein kol kayotze bazeh, same applies to anything else. Halacha yud bet, hazcharim, male rams, yotzim ba'ora kashur lahen al zachrutan, can go out with a piece of leather that was customarily tied over their male organs, kedei shelo ya'alu al hanekevot, so they should not mate with females. U'ba'ora kashur lahem al libehem, and you can also go with the piece of leather that was tied to their hearts. See it over here, it's called levuvin in the Talmud. Kedei shelo yiplu alehem ze'evim, so they shouldn't be attacked by wolves. Apparently the wolves will see the pattern of the leather, they'll think it's a bigger animal. I don't know. Bottom line is it was a protective thing. You can't go out with it on Shabbos. Nor can they go out with the cloths that were embroidered, that were used for beautifying the animals. Female sheep can go out with their tails tied upwards to invite males to mate with them, or tie down to reject them, so males shouldn't mate with them. They can also go out wrapped in cloths that are there not for beauty, but to protect their wool. That's okay. Ha'izim yotzot. Goats can go out. V'dadehen kshurot, with their udders tied, if the purpose is to dry out their milk supply. But if you want to hold on to the milk, and you're just tying it so it shouldn't drip out, you get every last drop, then you're trying to save on Shabbos with a load. The goats cannot go out with that on Shabbos. A donkey cannot go out with an actual saddle, even if it's tied to it before Shabbos. A horse should not go out with wearing a foxtail, nor with a scarlet thread between its eyes. An animal should not go out with its feeding bag, a basket hanging out from its mouth, nor with a sandal on its foot, nor wearing an amulet that's not protective and its efficacy hasn't been proven for animals. But it could go out with a bandage on its wound, or with some plates on a broken bone, or with a placenta that's hanging out of it, and you can plug the bell on its neck, to take a stroll around the courtyard. It can't go out to the public domain with a bell, but in the courtyard it can drezich. The same way you can load a donkey with its saddle cloth and have it stroll around the courtyard, not public domain. But even a donkey, even in a chatzer, even in a courtyard, you cannot hang the feeding bag on it on Shabbos. If it wants to feed, go to the trough and feed over there. Halacha Yudalet, the Rambam concludes the chapter. The same way there's a commandment for a person to have his animals rest on Shabbos, you also have an obligation for your slaves and maidservants to rest on Shabbos. Even though they have their own mind and they work on their own volition, the Jew has a mitzvah, the owner has a mitzvah to guard them and to stop them from doing work on Shabbos. Shenemar, as it says, same verse we had before, your ox and donkey should rest, and the son of your maidservant should also rest. Now, There are many types of slaves. Which slave are we talking about? Eved ve'amash anu mitzuvin al shvitatan. The slave and the maidservant which we're talking about, that we have to have them rest, heim avadim shemalu v'tavlu l'shem avdut v'kiblu mitzvot she'avadim chayavim behem. They're like fully Jewish slaves. They had a bris, they went to mikveh, and they took upon themselves to do all the mitzvahs which slaves are obligated in. Aval avadim shalom alu v'lo tavlu, but slaves who did not do a bris or didn't go to mikveh, ella kiblu alihen shava mitzvot shinstavu b'nei Noach bilvat. They only are acting like Noahides. They're guarding the 7 mitzvahs of Noach. Harehen ki ger toshav. They're like a ger toshav. Ger toshav is a regular guy living in Israel who takes upon himself to do 7 Noahide mitzvahs. Your slave can be like them, and you don't have that kind of commandment to supervise them. Umutarin la'asot melacha b'Shabbat la'atzman. For you, they can't do work, but for themselves, they're allowed to do work on Shabbos, b'farhesya ki Yisrael b'chol, publicly, just like a Jew would on the weekday. The Rebbe has a beautiful talk where he explains these like extra words. Publicly, like a Jew on a weekday. Because typically you would think if a slave didn't do a bris or didn't do a mikvah, he's not in his proper state. He's trying to prepare, trying to get into his better state. So the same way you would think, maybe like the same way a convert preparing for conversion, keeps extra laws. Maybe this slave, while he's on his way to doing a bris and everything, shouldn't do malacha on Shabbat. Says the Rambam, no, you can do it publicly like a Jew during the week. We never say that a Jew should stop doing work during the week because he's preparing for Shabbos. In this time you can do work, and that time not. So the slave also, right now he's in this state. For him it's weekday. He can do malacha on Shabbos. The Rebbe goes even deeper if you want to get into the whole analysis. He asks, what's the obligation for a Jew to stop this guy from doing work? Is it so the Jew's Shabbos shouldn't be interrupted, or is there an actual inherent obligation on the guy? So the Rambam says there's an actual inherent obligation on the guy to make sure that he's keeping Shabbos properly to the extent that it relates to you. But once it relates to him, you're like a Jew on the weekday. There's two different times for you. There's a weekday on this Shabbos, same for this guy, there's a weekday on this Shabbos. Now the actual ger toshav, the actual resident alien, we can only accept when there's the Jubilee going on in Israel. That's like, when most Jews are living in Israel, times of the temple. Today we have like a ger toshav, a guy who's like a resident alien in that he keeps the 7 Noahide laws. Now, ho'il ve'ger toshav osem malacha latzmo b'Shabbat. A resident alien, a guy keeping 7 mitzvahs, can do work for himself on Shabbos. The ger tzedek hareu ki Yisrael l'chol davar, and a righteous convert is like a regular Jew. B'mineh amar v'yinafesh ben amotcha ve'hager. Who is the Torah talking about when it says that the convert should rest? A regular convert is a regular Jew. A non-Jewish convert is just a non-Jew. He can do work for himself. Ze ger toshav shehu likito schiro shel Yisrael kemo ben amato. It's a resident alien who became your hired worker to the point that he works for you only. He's reserved for you, like a regular maidservant. This person also cannot do work for his master, but for himself he could do work. Even if he was your actual slave, not just your hired worker, he can again do work for himself, because as it relates to you, he's keeping Shabbos. As it relates to himself, he doesn't have that prohibition, and he can do work on his own.